Welcome, Explicados. Imagine being a poor young guy from Mississippi, making a living driving a delivery truck. Now imagine transforming from that into literally one of the most famous people on the face of the earth. That's the story we're diving into today. Now, to be clear right off the bat, Elvis Presley didn't just invent rock and roll all by himself. Not at all. What he actually did was bring together the incredible sounds of gospel, blues, rhythm and blues, and country. He synthesized them and helped carry that massive musical transformation to a truly global audience. Let's get into it.
You know, there's a huge historical misconception out there that Elvis just magically created rock and roll in a vacuum. But actually, he was more of a master synthesizer. He took four distinct, already existing musical traditions: the deep, soulful emotion of gospel, the raw storytelling of blues, the heavy, upbeat groove of rhythm and blues, and that heartfelt twang of country music. He soaked all of these up and fused them into a musical language that would eventually take over the world.
And we absolutely have to give credit where credit is due. Artists like Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Big Mama Thornton, and Arthur Crudup, they were the ones who really paved the way. These African-American pioneers laid the absolute groundwork for rock and roll, long before Elvis ever stepped up to a microphone. So his historic role wasn't about creating a genre from scratch. It was about taking these incredible influences, filtering them through his own life experience, and then amplifying that sound to an unprecedented scale.
So where does his specific story actually start? Well, Elvis Aaron Presley was born in 1935 in a really modest two-room house in Tupelo, Mississippi. His family had it incredibly tough financially, but music was a constant comfort. He was organically absorbing those powerful gospel hymns in Southern churches and soaking in the country tunes on the local radio. And then a major shift happens in 1948. The family moves to Memphis. Suddenly, this whole new world opens up. He starts hearing this electrifying rhythm and blues just pouring out of the clubs down on Beale Street. To him, these weren't totally separate genres. They were all just pieces of the exact same vibrant musical puzzle. All of these influences were just bubbling right into the surface until 1954. Picture this. We're inside the legendary Sun Record studio in Memphis. The studio founder, Sam Phillips, is on the hunt. He's looking for a voice that can bridge the gap between rhythm and blues and a country audience. Elvis is in there with guitarist Scotty Moore and bassist Bill Black. The session is, well, it's not really going anywhere. But then Elvis just spontaneously starts goofing around, playing a super sped-up, hyper-energetic cover of an Arthur Crudup song, That's All Right. The other guys jump in, and Sam Phillips hits record. He knew instantly they had just caught lightning in a bottle. The spark was lit.
So they have the sound, but what does it look like live? This new vibe became known as rockabilly. And honestly, during his early shows, Elvis was so incredibly nervous that his legs would just uncontrollably shake on stage. But here's the crazy part. The audience went absolutely wild for it. So that nervous twitch, it evolved into his deliberate signature move. It was like a physical manifestation of the music itself, just totally rhythmic, energetic, and untamed. With Colonel Tom Parker taking over as his manager and negotiating his move to RCA Victor, this raw Southern energy started sweeping across the entire country.
And that brings us to 1956. This was the year everything just exploded. We're talking consecutive, massive hits like Heartbreak Hotel, Don't Be Cruel, Hound Dog, and Love Me Tender. He's selling millions of records and popping up on national television. But the music was only half the story. It was the hair, the clothes, and, yeah, those infamous hip movements. His dancing was considered so provocative at the time that some TV programs famously ordered their camera operators to only film him from the waist up. No joke. To teenagers, he was the ultimate symbol of rebellion. To conservative adults, he was a terrifying threat to the established order. And naturally, that controversy just made him infinitely more famous.
But to really grasp the 1950s music scene, we have to pull back and look at the whole picture. Yes, Elvis had undeniable talent and insane charisma. That's a fact. But it's also a fact that he thrived within a system of deep racial inequality. The musical language he was using was heavily rooted in African-American traditions. However, as a white interpreter, he was handed this massive mainstream platform, exposure that was systematically denied to many of the black creators who had literally pioneered the sound. Understanding his legacy means we have to hold both of these truths at once: his immense personal talent and the historical reality of the era he operated in.
Meanwhile, his personal life was moving at warp speed. In 1956, he makes his Hollywood debut. He buys the iconic Graceland mansion, locking in a level of wealth that seemed impossible just a few years earlier. But then, plot twist. In 1958, Right at the absolute peak of his fame, he gets drafted into the U.S. Army and is shipped off to Germany. This was a really solemn period for him. It was also incredibly heartbreaking because he lost his beloved mother, Gladys, right around this time, which just devastated him. He did his time as a regular soldier, met his future wife, Priscilla, and when he finally came back to the States in 1960, the whole world was waiting with bated breath.
But the Elvis that came back, he entered a completely different phase of his career. Throughout the 1960s, he starred in over 30 Hollywood movies. 30! And while they definitely made money, let's be real, they were highly repetitive. The studios found a formula, pretty basic plots, heavily padded with songs, and they stuck to it. This era became his golden cage. Sure, he was ridiculously wealthy and known all over the planet, but artistically, he was totally stagnant. He barely performed any live concerts for years.
The contrast here is kind of wild if you think about it. The dangerous, raw, rebellious kid who completely shook up the 1950s had morphed into this predictable, sanitized Hollywood product. And what makes it even crazier is that while he was doing this, a whole new generation of bands were out there radically revolutionizing rock and pop music. The king was essentially trapped inside his own crown, locked into movie contracts while the entire musical landscape shifted right underneath his feet.
But you don't stay the king by just giving up. Fast forward to 1968. He was supposed to do this cozy, standard Christmas TV special. Instead, it turns into pure rock and roll history. Dressed head to toe in black leather, sitting in this tight, intimate circle with his old bandmates, Elvis is just completely unleashed. This is the famous '68 comeback special. It was kinetic, it was raw, and it was intense. He wasn't playing some cheesy movie character anymore. This was a deeply motivated artist fighting tooth and nail to reclaim his throne and remind everyone that he was still a massive, dangerous force in music. Riding the massive high of that comeback, he made a grand pivot in 1969. He headed to Las Vegas, and in the process, he pretty much invented the modern mega-residency. He traded the black leather for those iconic white jumpsuits and capes. And these shows, they were pure spectacle. We're talking huge bands, full orchestras, massive gospel choirs. He created this larger-than-life visual and musical experience that seamlessly blended rock, pop, and epic ballads all built around his incredible, mature voice. Now here is a piece of trivia that always surprises people. Despite being universally known as the king of rock and roll, Elvis won exactly 3 competitive Grammy Awards during his entire lifetime. And guess what genre they were actually for? Gospel. Every single one of them was for his religious recordings. I think it's a beautiful reminder of his deep, enduring personal roots, because no matter how crazy the Vegas spectacles got, that soulful church music from his childhood was always the closest thing to his heart.
By 1973, he reached a level of global reach that was almost hard to comprehend. That year, he did the Aloha from Hawaii concert, which was broadcast via satellite to audiences literally all over the world. This cemented him as way more than just an American pop star. He was a truly global icon. The sheer, unprecedented scale of that broadcast proved his appeal crossed every border, making him one of the most recognizable human beings on the planet.
But there is a really dark side to all this. The bigger the spectacle got, the heavier the toll it took on him. His final years are marked by this heartbreaking contrast. On stage, he was still the king. He could still deliver these moments of just staggering emotional power. But behind closed doors, the man was being crushed by the machine. He was dealing with a totally relentless, exhausting tour schedule, a painful divorce, and rapidly declining health, which was made so much worse by a heavy dependency on prescription medications. The legendary persona he built basically became a crushing weight he just couldn't escape.
And that brings us to the tragic end on August 16, 1977. Elvis Presley passed away at Graceland. He was only 42 years old. The shockwave of his death was felt everywhere. But when you look at the staggering numbers, like his 18 U.S. #1 hits and 14 Grammy nominations, it's clear that his premature passing instantly elevated him from a mortal man to an immortal legend. His music saw massive revivals, he was quickly inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1986, and he transitioned into a permanent, untouchable symbol of American pop culture. So when we look back, what is his ultimate place in history? As we said earlier, he wasn't a lone inventor, but he was an absolute master at cultural synthesis. He literally wrote the blueprint for the modern superstar. You know, the musician who's also a visual icon, an actor, and a massive global brand all at once. Artists who came after him, from the Beatles to Bruce Springsteen, they all openly admit that hearing Elvis for the first time was the moment everything changed for them. He completely rewired the entire musical world. Underneath all those gold records, the insane fame, and those legendary Vegas jumpsuits,
There was really just a shy kid from Tupelo trying to find a song to open a door. And when he finally found it, he didn't just walk through that door, he completely blew it off the hinges. His legacy lives on because he showed us how a single voice, pulling from the beautiful, complicated diversity of American music, could captivate the whole globe. Remember, everything is explained here. See you in the next video.